Okay, so today we're in Siman 103, Kuf Gimel, um, and really I gave a bunch of Gemaras and some Rishonim that deal with the question of, uh, what makes something pigam? When is there a pigam? That kind of a question. What is the source for pagam, and how we learn that pagam, that something that is rancid or something, it does not require bittul. It just doesn't make an issue. So, the truth is, it was very interesting. If you learned this Gemara in Avodah Zarah, if you learned more than what I just sent, you learned the whole sugya there. It's a interesting sugya, I thought, when I learned it. But I gave just the tamtzit here, this Mishnah. Um, Let's look at this Mishnah here. Maybe Sarah, you want to read this Mishnah in Avodah Zarah Daf Samach A Amud Bet?
Sure. יהיה נסח שנפל על גבי ענבים, ידיחן והן מותרות, ואם היו מבוקעות אסורות. נפל על גבי תנאים או גבי תמרים, אם יש בהם בנותן טעם, אסור. ובמעשה בביטוס בן זונן, שהביא גרגורות בספינה, ונשתברה החבית של יין נסח, ונפל על גביהן, ושאל החכמים והתירו. זה הכלל, כל שבהנתו בנותן טעם אסור, כל שאין בהנתו בנותן טעם מותר, כגון חומץ שנפל על גבי גריסין.
Exactly. So the first part of the Mishnah talks about a distinction between grapes that are whole and grapes that are broken. And it basically says if the grapes are whole, then you can we'll just wash them off. Whatever, if yain nesek falls, let me just wash them off. But if the grapes are broken, so then the yain nesek will go into them and potentially. Well, it says there the im ish sorry imam asurot. How does that sound like? Why are they asurs? First of all, that asurot sounds like it's saying that they're asur in every possible circumstance, right? They're asurot. It doesn't say asurot benot and tam. It says asurot. So what would that? According to which favorite Tana of ours would this Mishnah fit? Aaron.
You might say it's Rabbi Yehuda because it's Mim B'mina B'chol.
Exactly.
Or
you might say it's. Oh, go ahead. You have another option? Yeah, I didn't think of that.
Or you might say there's some issue about Yain Nesach that specifically activates in a Mim B'mina scenario.
You could say that. That's true. I don't know if the Gemara says such. I mean, I don't. We don't really go in either of those directions, but yeah. So why? So you said, but you're right. It could be a special din by Yain Nesech, but simply put, we could say it's like Rabbi. It's similar. It reminds us at least of Rabbi Yehuda that says min b'mino is never batal because this is anavim. This is yayin, so it's like the same min as anavim. Although Gemara actually gets into a question of whether this is old wine or new wine, because old wine actually would be a different min, right? Old wine is like a different thing, but fresh wine, like grape juice, is the same min, especially if you go by Taam. If you say the min is determined by taste and not by name, then it would be fresh wine, and then it'd be always usser. So that would hold that it's only min b'mino if it's a case of fresh wine. But that's actually not. So let's read.
Rav Nachum, you've moved in such a way that we can't really hear you.
You can't hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
Now you hear me?
Yeah.
So, but what does the Mishnah go on to say? It goes on to talk about growth. And it contrasts growth with the grapes and says that by growth, which are clearly a different min, no matter what you're going to say, what's the din of growth of these tamarim? Or, well, let's say tamarim maybe it's not growth. Maybe tamarim is fresh tamarim, but
growth is teinim.
Sorry, teinim. So sorry.
It says before it talks about the gorot, it says nafal al gav teinim.
Exactly. The Mishnah goes on. Exactly. The Mishnah says nafal al gav teinim Oh, al gabe tamarim. I was mixing the two, but yeah, anything that's definitely a different type. Now we have the din of noten tam because it's min b'sheino mino. Im yesh be'em noten tam asur. And we also have a different din, which is that they're not cracked, or we don't have the possibility of just rinsing them off. I would just say, what's your first guess? Why do we not rinse them off?
Because they don't have as nice of a peel as grapes.
Right. Exactly. Grapes really, if you drop grapes into your soapy dishwater, you can take them out and rinse them off, and they're completely impervious to anything that was in they fell into. But I wouldn't say the same thing by figs especially have holes in the bottom of them, and tamarim also are kind of mushy. So that would be the simple way to read the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah goes on and says an example which seems to contradict, right, the Mishnah, which is actually a common thing in Mishnayot, right, that you have an example that comes to contradict, because it says here that the rabbis permitted wine that fell on grogrot, and what didn't they do?
Check the flavor.
Exactly. They didn't say, well, is there no tentam or not? They didn't check. They just said they're permitted no matter what. So why are they permitted? Well, presumably because the wine ruins the flavor. So here is a Mishnah that tells us that things that ruin the flavor, you don't need to you don't need to check if there's no tentam. They're just going to be permitted. Of course, the Gemara goes on to learn the Mishnah in a different way. Does anyone know how the Gemara goes on to learn the Mishnah in a different way? It learns from the Seifa, where at the end of the Gemara it says, "Benoten tam." It says in the Mishnah, "Kol bahanato benoten tam asur." So what does that mean? Kol bahanato benoten tam. So this is the Mishnaic way of saying, if it's noten tam tov, it's we need it. But if it's not noten tam, so kol bahanato benoten tam asur. In other words, we're adding another proviso. It's not just that it's noten tam, it has to be noten tam and also be enjoyable. Which is the same thing as saying if it's not enjoyable, if it's pagum, then it's not asur. But the Gemara says so the Seifa seems to be talking about noten tam, and the Gemara learns that the Reisha should also be talking about noten tam, and therefore that usher that we saw at the beginning that said it's always usher actually turns out to be incorrect, or has to be understood as being usher when there is a tam. That's how the Gemara learns it, but that's not really our topic. That's really a topic of what's min b'mino, and do we go after name and do we go after flavor? But our main topic is this end part, that when there is no hanato, then it's mutar. So there's another Gemara which brings two lishnas of Reish Lakish, and maybe Aaron, you want to read the second Gemara? This is in Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. And this is after a bunch of discussions of the Gemara, which I kind of just summarized. And then we bring this Reish Lakish. Yeah.
Amar Reish Lakish, Noten Tam Lifgam, Shamru, Lo Shiomru, Kadera Zo Chasera Melech Yetera Melech Chasera, Chasera Melech Yetera Melech Chasera Tavlin Yetera Tavlin. Ela Kol She'en Chasera Klum, Ve'ena Ne'achalet Mipnei Zeh. So this is a case where according to the first lishon of Reish Lakish, when we say that something is noten tam lifgam,
right,
we're saying the dish is otherwise fine, and the thing we just added on its own makes it
right. So look at the Rashi. Look at the Rashi on kol she'eno chasera.
Kol she'ena chasera shum tikun ve'ena nechal mipnei zeh, klomar ve'isur zeh pogem ta'amo.
Stop there.
Ve'ena nechal avdavka dekivan dekim.
Wait.
Okay.
Really, that Rashi should have a period there, and then the next part is really a kind of a different point, because that's the first point that he says there is that what you just said, which is that the pot has to be the thing that fell into the pot has to ruin it because even though when the pot was in its in a state of perfection, if the pot was, let's say, too salty, the food was too salty, and then this thing fell in and it made it ruined because the combination of the salt and this thing that fell in really ruins the thing. But if the salt hadn't been there, if it had been flavored up in a different way, then this thing wouldn't have been pogemet. Then we don't say that the pagam came from it. It came from the fact that the pot wasn't spiced properly. But if you just go ahead and spice it properly, then there's no pagam. So the thing that fell in didn't cause a pagam. Here we're right. By the way, in both of these cases, actually, with the yayin nesek, or that fell into the figs, and also in this case, where we're talking about its pogem, we're really talking about something that is good on its own, and it's just pogem when it comes into contact with this other mixture. And here, Reish Lakish is saying, don't go too far with that rule because it could be that there's other factors involved that are causing the pot to be pagum by this foreign object, like it's chaser salt, like it's missing salt or spices. And in that case, it would not be called a davar pogem because it really could potentially be a davar that helps the thing if you just had the right spices there. Now, let's read the second lishna. So Aaron, read the second lishna. Second lishna is going to be the opposite. If you look at Rashi, he says, had Reish Lakish lekula. In other words, that was a chumrah. That was saying, if I can think of a way that this wouldn't have been pagum because if I added salt, then it's not. Then it's going to be aser because it's not really pogem. Now we're going to say that was a chumrah. Now we're going to say a kula. So read the Gemara.
Be'ikad Amar Reish Lakish Notan Taam Lifgam Shamru Ein Omrin Kader Zo Chaser Melech Keter Melech Chaser Tavlin Yeter Tavlin Elahashta Miha Ha Pagma.
Right. So the Gemara is saying, just look at it as it comes before you. Right now, in its current state, it's pogem, and that's it. Just don't be so complicated. And it's very interesting because we don't know exactly what Reish Lakish's opinion is, but this opinion is the kula here. We have two lishnas. This opinion is saying, just look at it how it is now. If it's causing a failure in the pot, if it's ruining the pot, then it's mutter, regardless of the fact that it could have been different if you added spices. And the Gemara goes on to discuss these opinions and actually proves very nicely with another statement of Rav Yochanan. I didn't bring it for you, but the Gemara goes on to bring it. I don't think I brought it for you. Another statement of Rav Yochanan that clearly says that the second lishna is correct. And the Gemara ends Hilkata like the second lishna. Of course, that Hilkata we said is sometimes considered a Gaonic addition, but it's really unnecessary because the Gemara itself proves that Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan, the Reish Lakish is, of course, the Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan. So we bring a statement from Rabbi Yochanan that proves that the second lishna is correct. And I was thinking about this Reish Lakish and what he's saying here. It really strikes me as a case of the famous Gemara question of Zev Zegorem. Because essentially what we're saying here is when you have two things that are causing the pagam, one is the fact that there's too much salt in it, and the other is the fact that there's a pagam thing that entered it. A thing that causes the pagam. In other words, good vinegar went into the pot and good salt went into the pot, and Reish Lakish is saying, so the good vinegar that was aser and the good salt that was mutter. So you can say, well, what made it pagum? It's both the combination of the salt and the vinegar. Zev Zegorim, and one of those two things is heter. So maybe it should be heter. Maybe you have no right to say that the isser is what's causing the pagam. Maybe it's the salt that's the heter thing that's causing the pagam, and therefore it will be aser. So he's saying zev zegor. It's almost like Reish Lakish is saying zev zegorem. When two different things cause the same effect, you can choose either one of them to be the cause, which is interesting proof to that whole Gemara famous question.
Nachum, can you just explain it to me again? Zev Zegorim, very literally, or as literally as you can.
Yeah, Zev Zegora means this and this causes something. In other words, it's a concept that comes up in kashrut actually. If, for example, you have a cheese that you're making a cheese and you put in it rennet that is not kosher and some enzyme that is kosher, and either one of them, both of them together are things that are capable of causing cheese to become hard. And the question is, do you say, well, the Isser one was there, so the whole thing should be Isser because there is an agent, one of the agents that causes this thing is Isser. But if one of the agents is Heter, then we're sort of left in a dilemma. Maybe we go by the Heter one, or maybe we go by the Isser one. We don't know. We have two different possible causes for this event, for this cheese to be made, for example. So we have Zev and Zeh Gorem, two different things that cause it. So what's the halacha? Is the halacha we say, well, do we say, it's mutter because even without the Isser, it would have been cheese? Or do we say, no, it's Isser because the cheese, after all, the Isser one did help make the cheese? So that's the halachic question of Zev Zegorem. And I'm saying here it sounds like that both of them we're being makil. Zev Zegorem, we're being makil. We can assume that both of them caused it together, and we don't just say only the other one caused it. And so therefore the Isser here causes the pagam, which actually makes it's good for us because then the Isser is no longer an Isser because it's causing a pagam. That's the way we're going to pass it. So it's an interesting case because this is an interesting halacha because that's the way we're going to pass it. In other words, if you have something that's pogam a dish, but there's something else that's pogam the dish that was heter, so you still get the kula of noten taam lifgam. That's the way we pass it.
Just one more question. Is this just a regular suffix in which there's a difference if it's deraisa or drabanan, or is it something else?
I don't think there's a suffix. Oh, you're saying why is he being lenient? Because you're saying maybe this is a din deraita, really, right? Because if it wouldn't be pagum, then this would be an Isser deraita falling into our thing, and it gives flavor. It's not batel, so it'd be Isser deraita. And yet he's saying it's mutter, even though something else could be the main cause of the pagam in the dish. Quite a leniency. And then the second part of the Rashi, which I told Aaron not to read, maybe you read it now. And this is an important little second addendum here to this Rashi.
It doesn't have to make it uneatable. It just has to make it a little bit worse, such that it is not eaten.
Right. Is that you? It's almost like
Rav Nachum, you're moving away again.
Sorry. Yeah, I have my Gemara. I should put it here. The Eino Ne'achelet is really like a quotation from the Gemara, and he's explaining it and saying, don't read it literally, that you can't possibly eat the food, but rather read it that it causes any sort of pagam. In other words, the food was, let's say you made pizza and you put in some forbidden anchovies, I don't know, and it makes it a little bit worse now because you have these anchovies that are forbidden anchovies somehow. But it's still pizza, so you'll eat it. You still like it. So it's not that it's eino ne'achelet. It's that I'd rather not have that thing there.
Well, but it can't be that you'd rather not have it because it's a sul, right? It has to be that anchovies don't taste good on pizza.
Right. Like the Mishnah said, if I have actual, I think it means sensory hana'ah, like not halachic hana'ah. In other words, not that I'm pissed off that I'm doing an avera here, but that I'm getting hana'ah. I'm less getting hana'ah, physical hana'ah, sensual hana'ah, in that sense. So this is all Mishnayos and Gemaras, but where is the Torah source for this? In other words, we can't just the Mishnah has to be based on the Torah. So that's the next. That's source 4 in Avodah Zarah Samach Zayin Samach Het. Samach Zayin Amud Bet until Samach Het Amud Aleph, and that's a machloket of Tanaim. Maybe Ilani, you want to read it?
second, והתניא, אחד נותן טעם לפגם, ואחד נותן טעם לשבח, אסור, דברי רבי מאיר. רבי שמעון אומר, לשבח אסור, ולפגם מותר. So it's a machloket Tanaim between Rabbi Meir and Rish Lakish. Do we say noten tam? Between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir says noten tam lifgam asur, and Rabbi Shimon says noten tam lifgam mutar. My tamad Rabbi Meir gamar mi giulei ovdei kochavim. Giulei ovdei kochavim lav noten tam lifgam hu ve'asar achmana hachinami lo shna.
Wait, so I just stop for a second. The Mishnah that we had above, was that, so who was that going like?
That was going like Rabbi Shimon, because we said no ten tam lifgam mutar.
Even though it's a stam Mishnah.
Right, which we normally say stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir.
Normally say stam Mishnah is like Rabbi Meir. Here we actually have a stam Mishnah that seems to be Rabbi Shimon on the surface, at least, because it's the Mishnah is saying about Toten Tam Lifgam is mutar, and of course it does use that term. Now in the Gemara here, we're actually seeing the term Noten Tam Lifgam. Up till now in the Mishnah, we just saw Kol Shebahanato B'Noten Tam. We didn't see the word Pagam. We saw Bahanato. Okay, so we have a machlokas. Yeah, we have a machlokas Rabbi Shimon and Reish Lakish, and Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, and now we're going to see what their sources are.
Okay, so Rabbi Meir says noten tam lifgam asur from the case of the Klei Midyan in Bamidbar when we had the milchama of after the whole incident with Zimri, whatever, the znut in Baal Peor. Okay, the war of vengeance on Midyan. So after the milchama Midyan, we were told all the kelim we got from Midyan we had to at the shared tavor ba'esh, taviro ba'esh, had to put things through fire and water, to do to get the kelim so that we could use them.
That's we call it hagalat
kelim. Hagalat kelim, yeah.
In modern parlance.
Yeah, hagalat kelim. We had to do that even though which suggests that the kelim we had to do it even though the kelim were noten tam lifgam, which suggests that even though they were noten tam lifgam, they were asur. That's our assumption is that those kelim.
Right. In other words, first of all, it's interesting, by the way, this limud only works if you have this big assumption that pots are noten tam lifgam. In other words, some kind of empirical knowledge. In other words, if it could be, I could just explain the Torah differently. I could say the Torah has no such concept of it becoming pagum just because it's in a pot, and therefore that's why it says to do hagala, because there's no other, it'll last forever. In other words, in fact that's kind of what Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Meir is saying. Rabbi Meir is saying that there is no such thing as pagum, and therefore, you could say that's what he's saying. There is no such thing as pagum, and therefore you see from here that you have to do hagala because even a year later, because pagum is still even if it would become pagum, it would maybe there is pagum, but it's asur. That's the way Rabbi Meir learns it. But you could say there's no such thing as pagum, and that's why it's asur. But Rabbi Meir says like this. Sorry, let me go back. Rabbi Meir says simply, it's pagum, and even though it's pagum, you have to do hagala. So therefore, you see that pagum is not a heter, and it being pagum is not a heter. Right, you have any?
You could ask about this. Maybe it's like an issue of b'diavad versus chatchila, right? Like we're not saying that you add pagum, something that is pogem the flavor and asul lechatchila. We're just saying b'diavad, it's okay. So like cooking in the pots, you could say is a lechatchila choice.
In other words, you're saying maybe it is pagum, but you just shouldn't rely on that.
Right. Sort of.
Yeah, you could say that. Well, he's going to say it's asur. He's going to say it's fully asur. So wait, so let's go back. He said, so read it. So read Rabbi Meir's proof again, Ilan.
My Talmud Rabbi Meir, Gamar mi Geolei Goyim lav noten ta'am lifgamhu ve'asar rachmana hachinami lashna.
Right. So in other words, even though it's not in Taam Lifgam, these pots,
which would make it, yeah.
Which
you would think would make it mutar.
Which if you think not in Taam Lifgam makes things mutar, then why are you doing Hagala?
You wouldn't need Hagala. Right.
You wouldn't need Hagala. Right. And yet, in other words, it's almost like he's saying as soon as the flavor goes into the pot and even comes out of it, it's already pagum. Who wants to eat metallic flavor?
Rabbi,
yeah.
The Pashtus, the whole limud assumes a very logic assumption that even though not all test that is in a keli is tam lifgam, after a day or so, and it's tam kelim b'nei omam, it is already tam lifgam. The tam got ruined. Like the assumption is
we haven't got there yet. We haven't got there yet. At this point, it's still immediately. It could be immediately pagum. It could be potentially that Rabbi Meir holds that it's immediately pagum, and it's because that's going to be a later part the Gemara is about to say. But right now, maybe it's pagum immediately, and it's usher.
Sorry, just making sure I understand correctly. Rav Meir is saying that no ten tam lifgam and no ten tam lishvach are both asur.
That's right.
And he learns that from Yoreh vet Kochavim, right? Yoreh vet Kochavim is that even though it's not no ten tam lifgam,
it is no ten tam lifgam.
No, lav no ten tam lifgam. That's what the Gemara said. Yoreh vet Kochavim lav no ten tam lifgam.
That's a rhetorical question.
That's a bit tmiyah. That's a rhetorical question. He's saying lav, like Lilana read it. Lav noten tam lifgamhu? Question mark. It's like the yeshiva bacher when he goes. Why does the yeshiva bacher go into the swimming pool?
So how do you learn from that noten tam lishvach is asur?
Why?
No, noten tam lishvach. Everybody agrees is asur. That's not. We're trying to learn that. We're trying to learn noten tam lifgam is asur.
I want to hear the end of the joke afterwards. So.
Okay. The joke is he saw the sign in front of the pool that says, "No swimming allowed." But he was yeshiva bacher, so he read it. No swimming allowed. That's right. I didn't say the full sign. Really, private property, no swimming allowed. So he read it. He read it like this: private property, no swimming allowed. So you can always put it. Nechama Leibovich has said the same thing. He said, "Be careful where you put a question mark, because you could read the Torah." She says only when Rashi tells you to put a question mark, because she says like this. You could read the Torah like this: Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, haaretz hayta.
Chas v'shalom.
Chas v'shalom. But she says, therefore, don't be careful about where you put your tmiha, your questions. But Ilana put it correctly here, and she said, "Lav noten tamhu v'asar rachman," and the Torah forbid it anyway. So hachanami loshna. So too in all cases of noten tam lifgam, even when it's not balua in a kli, when it's some other case, also. V'idach, so go on, Ilana, v'idach.
I was going to say, that's why we have tamim mikra, because if we didn't have tamim mikra, we would put in our own tamim, and they would be lifgam.
And they would be, that would be a tam lifgam.
Exactly. Okay. Okay. V'idach, kid Rav Huna b'reid Rav Chia. De'amar Rav Huna, De'amar Rav Huna b'reid Rav Chia, lo asrat Torah, ela k'dera bat yoma, de la lifgam hu. So how does Rabbi Shimon deal with the Giulei Goyim? Because that was Rabbi Meir's proof text for Noten Tam Lifgam Asur, but Rabbi Shimon, who holds Noten Tam Lifgam Mutar, he has to deal with these psukim. So what does he do? He says, the reason that the only kelim that were forbidden were those that were bnei yomam, Kelim B'nei Omam, they're still giving Taam l'shevach, and that's why we had to do Haggalah on these Klei Mijan, because they were all B'nei Yomam. Like, we got them from Mechemet Midian, and immediately we got them that day. They had been cooked in that morning by the Midianites, so we wanted to cook in them. So because they had not yet given Taam Lifgam, which would matter them, we had to do Haggalah.
But they're not right, and therefore you have to do Haggalah when it's not Pagam. But it didn't forbid on the second day. Rabbi Meir makes no such distinction. Rabbi Meir is saying it's forbidding on all days. The Torah is forbidding on all days to use these pots, because he says there's no distinction between Taam Lifgam and Taam Lishvach. And Rabbi Shimon says, no. The Torah is only forbidding that first day. And I'm saying, I'm just sort of arguing on the side of Rabbi Meir and saying Rabbi Meir's pshat is actually more straightforward if you read the Torah. Torah didn't say anything about days, didn't say anything about Pagam. It just said, do Haggalah. So Rabbi Meir is learning very nicely. Do Haggalah in all circumstances. No, Rabbi Shimon should pardon me. I have to defend both sides, So now Rabbi Meir has to answer. Ve'idach is Rabbi Meir now. He has to say, well, maybe that's right. Maybe the Torah only forbid the one day.
Okay. Ve'idach De'ra bat Yoma nami Efshar Dela Pagama Porta.
So how do you understand that?
Even Rabbi Meir says even Ekdera Bat Yoma, he says that still has some Taam Lifgam. Like even if it's a new pot, like what we would consider we would say that doesn't yet give Taam Lifgam, but he holds it. There's a little bit of Taam Lifgam and that's why we need to do Haggalah even on the pots from today. No, sorry. The pots from today, the pots that are B'nei Omam, have a pgam, and even so, we don't say no tein latam lifgam mutar. We have to do Haggalah. So this is proof that.
So basically, he says there's no. He says like this: nothing really happens that big a deal after one day. The first day it was pagam, and the second day it was pagam, and the third day it was pagam.
You have to do Haggalah anyway.
You have to do Haggalah on all the days. He sees there's no distinction. That's what I was saying at the beginning when I was explaining the drasha. I was explaining it according to Rabbi Meir. That's saying according to Rabbi Meir, there's no such thing as a day later. It's up. In other words, it's always pagam. It's pagam. Okay, a day later it's more pagum, but it was pagum to start with. It's always pagum because who wants metallic flavored chicken soup? Who wants that balua that's been sitting in a pot for even an hour? It's not really tasty. It's purta, like Rashi says.
Right, it's like I was going to say, Rashi gets this language from here, the Pagma Porta.
Right, Porta, exactly. Yeah, right. It says Porta here, and Rashi said Porta. It's a little bit Pagum right away. And yet the Torah, for everybody agrees that that's even according to you, Rabbi Shimon, the first day is Asur, and it's Pagum. So you see, you have to agree with me that Pagum is Asur. The Devarim Pagumim is Asur. So Rabbi Shimon has to now answer how he actually holds his opinion. What's his pasuk? Rabbi Meir says, prove me otherwise. So Rabbi Shimon comes along, and that's your cue, Ilana.
Okay, Rabbi Shimon Maitama Ditanya Lo Tuchlu Kol Nevela Lager Asher Bisharecha. Okay, so you're supposed to so we're not allowed to eat a nevela. We have to give it to the resident aliens, right, in our midst. Okay.
Yes. So this is a pasuk from Devarim that says, "Don't eat nevela, but do what? Give it to a god." In other words,
right.
You shouldn't just bal tashchit. You shouldn't throw it away. You should give it as a gift to a Gentile for whom it is permitted.
But okay, kol haruya lager kruya nevela she'en ruya lager eina kruya nevela. What this means is that if it's called a nevela, then it's something that a ger could eat, which means that if it's not fitting for a ger to eat, if the taam is lifgam, like if it's so icky that a ger wouldn't want to eat it, then it's mutar for us to eat it.
Right. In other words, when the Torah said to you, give it to the goy, he says, give it to the goy. Why? Because it's an nevela. But you would never give something that was rotten meat to a goy. It would be very insulting. So when the Torah said, give it to the goy because it's nevela, it must be that the word nevela contains within it the idea that it is good, that it has some goodness to it, because the Torah is telling you, take that nevela and give it to a goy. So it must be that once it's pagum, and you should never give it to a goy in that case, then it's not a nevela either. So that means we see that the idea of the forbiddenness of it goes away when it's rotten. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I said good? Okay. Okay. Yeah, Ilana, you're with us? You're with me?
Yeah, I'm with you. Keep going, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. I was just puzzling over the next part. Okay. Rabbi Meir, hahu lema ute srucha meikara. So just like Rabbi Shimon had to deal with the Giulei Goyim proof text, now Rabbi Meir has to deal with this pasuk from Devarim about like Gerasher Titnano. How does he who says noten Taam Lifgam asur, how does he explain the giving to the ger? And he says, this comes to exclude something that was like absolutely disgusting from the very beginning, that never had any time when it was like edible. I'm not sure I understand, but that's something that you don't have to give to the ger.
Srucha mi'ikara means like, imagine the animal had like boils on it. Mm-hmm. It was like an animal that itself was like dying of leprosy. Mm-hmm. And so it was srucha mi'ikara. It was from the beginning, before you shechted it even, it was srucha. It was not fitting for a goy. Mm-hmm. But srucha mi'ikara. But if it was, I think Rashi says srucha mi'ikara, read Rashi, srucha mi'ikara.
Srucha meikara, mukat shchin mechayim.
In other words, boils.
Dehoil ve'ifkama mikodem shvacha, mikodem shaba lidei nevela, lo chal shem nevela aleha. Aval hecha de itzar meikara, tu lo paka isur mishum pgam.
So Rashi's saying a very interesting point here. He's saying like this: if it was like rancid when it was still alive, before it actually became a nevela, it was still like a heter, then it never became a nevela. When you shechted it, it never really, when you non-shechted it, when you badly shechted it, it didn't become a nevela because it was never really edible. But once it became edible, you shechted this animal and it was perfectly good. You shechted it in a bad way. So the knife was, let's say, you did shahiyah, you didn't do it in one stroke, and the animal is now nevela, but it's good meat. Once it's good meat, it never loses its shame isser. It says aval hecha de itzar meikara tu lo paka isser mishum pagam. Once it's made forbidden, it doesn't lose its isser status just because it is rancid, because it's bad flavor. It remains isser. Once an isser, always an isser. But the isser meikara happened before it was an isser. It was still a live animal, so it wasn't usser. And then it was boiled. It had covered with boil, so it was rancid. So it was not. So he says no. There's no such thing as pagam becoming able to change something from isser to heter. Mm-hmm. To go back to the Gemara.
Rabbi Shimon. So how does he respond to the way Rabbi Meir interprets the pasuk? Or he used the pasuk for something else. So how is he gonna lima'et srucha meikara? Because he used the pasuk to teach noten Taam Lifgam. So Rabbi Shimon srucha meikara la srucha miyuta afra be'almahu. So he doesn't need to. He doesn't think that srucha meikara needs any sort of miyut because it's not even food. It's like a far. It's totally inedible.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. He said this is obvious. This is obvious. It's obvious that it's a
yeah.
It's a far the alma. It's like ashes. It's walking ashes. Yavni?
Just to check, we've just made an ukimta on Rabbi Meir that brings him closer to Rabbi Shimon, right? By saying that like he doesn't really hold that like everything, it doesn't matter if it's pogem or not pogem, everything is a sul. He just thinks that like it has to be like really pagum from the beginning for it to be
but it has to be it has to be pagum, and according to Rashi, it has to be pagum in a state where it had yet not become isser. If it has to have never become isser. By the way, we're going to see this idea of shem isser alav in the achronim, and you don't actually see it in the Gemara here, those exact words, but The Rashi here says the idea of Shem Isser. He says, Heicha de itaser mekara, once it's become forbidden, tulo paka Isser mishum pagam.
Still, at the beginning, I don't know that we would have assumed that that was right. So at the beginning, I don't know that we would have assumed that that was Rabbi Meir's position. Like that is and we would have assumed that that was Rabbi Shimon's position about something that's Chukha Kara.
Yeah. Well, we might have assumed we might have assumed that Rabbi Meir agreed with Rabbi Shimon that it's just that a rotten a live cow suffering from leprosy, is not going to be usher. But maybe right because of Rabbi Shimon's reason. Because
right,
but
the original phrasing of Rabbi Meir, like before we got into the discussion of the psukim, I would have thought, no, he says that that's a stool.
Agreed. It is a somewhat of an ukimta on him, but I would say it's a minor ukimta. But yeah, it is somewhat of it's an ukimta in a very special case. Usually an ukimta is when we take a general opinion and we restrict it to a very small set of cases. Here we took a general opinion and we excluded a very special case from it, but we left the generalness of it.
Fair enough.
So I don't think it was a classical ukimta. A classical ukimta is a severe restriction on a din. Here it's a very minor restriction. So wait, just let's finish the Gemara. Amar Ula.
Okay, Amar Ula, machloket shehishpiach ulavasof pagam, aval pagam meikara divrei hakol mutar. Okay, so the machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon is only in a case where this isur, like it tasted good, and then a pagam happened to it.
Wait, we lost you, Ilana. We lost your microphone.
Sorry. But if it was pagum from the beginning, then Rabbi Meir would modeh to Rabbi Shimon that it's mutar, right?
Yeah. So what do we just do here? We just did an amazing thing.
Right?
This is an ukimta. This is a major ukimta. Now, how does it come out? If I ask my question about avodah zarah, samach hey amud bet, that Mishnah, is it Rabbi Meir now?
Now it's
could be. Now it could be Rabbi Meir. Now it could be Rabbi Meir. Ula made a huge ukimta, and he said all this machlokas is only in a case where the thing fell in and it did a shevach it improved the food, but then you kept cooking it and it became a pagam, right? That's the only place where they're arguing. But in the case of our Mishnah, where it's, let's say, yayin that fell on figs and ruined their flavor, meikara, right from the beginning, then maybe Rabbi Meir agrees. Again, Amar Ula, machloket sheshbiach, that they were good at the beginning, it was sof pagam, aval pagam meikara divrei kol mutar. I see that last line is like upturning everything. Now the Mishnah could be Rabbi Meir. And that's an ukimta again. That's an ukimta where we're saying that really there's a lot more agreement. Maybe the halakha is like Rabbi Meir. Now, there's a lot more agreement about noten Taam Lifgam. Rabbi Meir agrees to it. Okay.
How does that work with the Gilei Goyim?
Because when it went in, it was good. Good question, but I had an answer for you, I think. Because when it went in, it was good. But that was a good question.
When it went in, it was good. Because
when it went in, it was good. You're saying, but when it comes out, it's pagam immediately, you're saying.
When it went into the pot, it was good?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. You have a good question. Is Ula really right? It's a good question. In other words, does it fit to everything that we learned before? You're asking.
Yeah. Maybe they threw some milk into these pots, and it spoiled within a few hours. But at first it made it taste great.
No, but the question is: do you look at when it goes into the pot, or do you look at when it comes out of the pot? The moment it comes out of the pot, it's pogem. It's pogem the food.
Maybe not. Maybe that's not the reality.
I think that's what Rabbi Meir holds, that it's pogem all along. It's always pogem food. And therefore, when it comes when it first interacts with my heter food, when I'm cooking in the Isser pot, I'm cooking my heter food. Its first interaction is mi'ikara pogem. That's what I would say.
It does seem like Ula and the Stam's interpretation of this discussion are at odds, and that these are just two different interpretations of what the machloket is about, and that it doesn't seem like there's a good way of reconciling Ula's ukimta with the Stam's interpretation of the
That's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say we're trying to see if we can reconcile it. Reconcile.
No, yeah, I'm.
You're saying we failed. But don't say that until the end, until we've exhausted all possibilities. I mean, you're right. You can say there's different approaches here, but Ula is saying that everything that Rabbi Meir is saying only when it's pogem, when it is mashbiach at the beginning. That's when he says he doesn't agree that pagam it helps us. Well, I can explain Gulei in Nochrim. In other words. Oh, wait, what does he say about it?
No, so we need the Gilei Nochrim to be something that is Mashbiach.
Oh, wait a second. Gilei Nochrim, he has to say that it's always pogem, and yet it's usher. So I had to say that when it went in, it was heter. That's why I said that.
Yeah, so Gilei Nochim Meikara, it was lishvach, like it was good. It was like the first time it went in, it was good food.
Right. Like I said, when it first went into the wall, it was good. And then it became pagam. So in that case, he would also say...
Well, you have to redefine what meikara is, right? Like if meikara is the first time it went into the pots, then it's understandable. So meikara is the first time it interacts with the food, then we have a problem.
Then it's a problem, right. Okay, it may be a difficult limud, but it's interesting if what Ula's goal is. I mean, he has a tradition like that. He has a tradition that's what Rabbi Shimon, that's the machloket between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir. I gave you I just sort of gave you a random Rashi in the middle of, just because it's hard to find this Rashi and it's relevant to our sugya. There's a source 6 in my list is a Rashi on Avodah Zarah Ayin Vav Amud Aleph. It's just a random Rashi over there, Bat Yomo. Ilana, maybe you read it for us. It's a random Rashi, but it has an important point that we're going to see in our sugya.
Okay, Bat Yoma, שבשל בה עובד כוכבים היום, אבל בישל בה אתמול, כבר הפיק בה טעמו בלינת לילה, ושוב כשפולטו בתבשיל אחר, אינו אלא לפגם.
Right.
So what do we mean by a ktera that's bat yoma? It means that the non-Jew cooked in it today. But as long as he cooked in it yesterday, then it already, then the fact that night passed, right? That a night went by, means that it gave it had a plita of taste that was lifgam and would render it mutar, presumably.
So the words that you have to remember here, this is the linat laila. This is where Rashi says linat laila. That linat laila is what causes a pot to become pagum, and not a longer period.
It doesn't say may late.
Not may 8 late, exactly. I didn't want to say the term, but yeah. There's Rashi's holding it's linat laila. And you see the Beit Yosef brings this up as a kula, as he's mitzaref this. He joins this together with another opinion to create a heter in a certain case. Hopefully we'll see. Yeah.
Which came first?
Well,
Lila or Meileit?
Well, it says Vayehi Erev Vayivoker, so the Lila came first. But no, I think that Rashi is a pretty old Rishon, pretty early Rishon. So I guess that's the earlier opinion. Yeah, I think the 8 8 is the Beis Yosef says the Rosh says the 8 8, the Rosh and the Tosfot, and he says, well, let's follow the 8 to 8, the 24 hours, because it's good to be from. It kind of says like that. It's like it's a stringency.
I think a question that we'll have is one can rely on Lina Lila.
Yeah, it's a good tool to have in your toolbox to know this Rashi. That
Right.
Linat Laila. It's
Right.
always good. You can sound if you really want to impress people. You'll say, "Oh well, I can be making because there was at least Linat Laila, and there's the Rashi and Avodah Zarah. Ayin Vav. If you can
A
quote your
challenge
source,
lunch for the whole community. Maybe
what
it's
exactly?
a challenge lunch for the whole community. Maybe
If you can, right, if you can quote the source, then you can fasken like it. You just say, "Well, I think there's a Rishon that says something more lenient, but it doesn't sound so convincing." Okay. Um, Torah to buy it. Now we're at Torah to buy it. I like this Torah to buy it. The Torah to buy it is just a wonderful book of the Rashba. I mean, it's actually very easy and nice to read. You can just sit down and read the Torah to buy it. It's just very well written. It's just a nice, clear book. He goes through sugya after sugya of our Shulchan Aruch. And if history had been different, that might have been our book of Paskening. It's just a very nicely organized book. I mean, it doesn't have sifim and simanim, but it has sha'arim. The problem with it actually is that it has that like chelik dalid shar aleph is like very long, and it has all of our topics in it. He didn't divide it at all into subsections, which makes it hard to find things. But your teacher here found you Torah to Bayit Aruch Bayit Dalid Shar Aleph. There you go. But I wrote Daf Yud Tet Almud Aleph. That's in that's the page number according to the Girsa that I have, which is the Mosad Rav Kook. So here, who here? Maybe Raphael, you want to read?
Yes, sure.
I give you
גם
easy
זה
reading.
שאמרו, לא שפוגם לגמרי עד שאינו נאכל מחמת פגם, אלא אפילו פוגם קצת, הרי הוא קדירה שאינה בת יום, שהרי
No,
קדירה
Afilu
שאינה בת
Pogam
יומה
Katzat.
פוגמת.
Period. Yeah, Shaharei, right? Shaharei, and here's his proof. But that's what we already saw in
שהרי קדירה
Rashi,
שאינה בת
kind of.
יומה אינה פוגמת על המעט. ואפילו אחי אמרו דקדירה שאינה בת יומה אינה אוסרת. So he here combines Rish Lakish with Rabbi Meir's proof against Rabbi Shimon that
in other words, who said Purta? Who said Purta?
Rabbi Meir.
Right.
So
and yet Rabbi
Pagma Puta. We can't even the small pgam of a bat here he like puts it on a sheina bat yoma. Even
exactly.
a sheina bat yoma, it's pgam purta. Like
exactly,
even
it's a little bit weird. Good point. You're making a good point. He's using the language of Purta about the case where we didn't call it Purta. We called it a little bit of Pagam in the first day, and then full Pagam after a day. And he's saying, well, boys, let's be reasonable, or men and women, let's be reasonable. After all, any flavor that comes out of a pot that was cooked even an hour ago is not a major hindrance to the good flavor of my soup. It is a purta. It is also a small amount.
You could also say the opposite. You could say that basically, if we say that noise and taam of a pot is chashuv enough, why would a day cancel it? Okay, it's a bit worse now, but it's not. It didn't change that much, and that's it. That's how the Rashba phrases it. He says basically, if we in the first, it's basically the same as in the first day, and even though that we say it's tam lifgam because it's
okay.
A bit מקולקל.
Nice, he said. Ve'im.
ואם תאמר, הלא נותן טעם לפגם מנבלה גמרינן. לא, וסתם נבלה הראוי לגרש, מה נבלה לא קשיא, דעתם.
Oh, stop. Exclamation mark. וסתם נבלה הראוי לגר, שמה נבלה. Exclamation mark. Because he's saying like this. Where's our limud from, after all? Our limud is from nevela not ru'i lager. If you had a nevela that was slightly pagum, could you eat it?
Technically, yes. Yeah.
No, you can't. That would be ra'ui lager. It would be shem nevela. If it's slightly pagum, it has to be very pagum. It has to be not ra'ui to eat. That's very pagum. Then it loses its name nevela. And yet, how? So he's asking an amazing, a super strong question, which is, how can you learn a din that a purta, tiny bit of pagam, is mutter from a source that says a huge amount of pagam is mutter? It's a kol shekin in reverse. Doesn't really work. You understand the point?
Yeah.
But it has to be not
the whole-
rawi to a ger. It has to be rotten meat. And from that, we're going to learn that my soup, because the previous guy who cooked cheese in my pot, and that doesn't really add much to my soup, but my soup is totally fit to a ger. A ger would enjoy my soup, and yet the soup is going to be mutter because the cheese that he cooked beforehand was pogam in my soup. It doesn't make sense. How can you learn this? This is actually our question for the next period of time. I don't know, but this is the major question. How can you learn out the Purta din from the din of Nevela? So go on. So now he's going to answer. Lo kasha.
לא קשה, הדעה תאמין להתירה בפני עצמה. The whole limud goes on a hater on actually eating the substance. If I could actually extract that piece of balua out of the dish and actually eat it. For that I would need actually for it to be completely מקולקל. אבל להתירה בפני עצמה, הילקח עד דמפגמה לגמרי. מאכילת גר אסורה, אבל איסור תערובת שהולכים בו אחר נתינת טעמו, כיוון שנתן טעם לפגם, כלשהו בתערובת מותר. Meaning, in תערובת, we're not
read the next 6 words.
לפי שאינו נותן טעם, אדרבה
פוגם. That's his explanation.
Because
he says over there we were talking about eating the actual piece of meat. Then it had to be fully pagum. But here, it's just that we're a holech achar tam. We're just interested in the flavor. And this, he's saying like this. He's saying a very subtle point. Saying this is not called noten tam anymore. This is called noten pagam. It's not really a din of noten tam anymore. Lefi she'eno noten tam, the other rabba pogem. It's actually pogem. It's not toten tam. In other words, when we're talking about tam in something, then we only need a small amount because it's not in the category of natina tam anymore. It's a davar pagum. This is not the best answer.
He's also basically saying.
You go ahead.
He's also saying that in Taruvot, we're never actually talking about the substance. We're talking about a remnant of it. Meaning the chashash isn't actually that I'm going to eat the piece of meat, even though it's possible I will. The only thing that's left is the stam, and when it becomes tam lifgam, it simply like annihilates itself.
Right. All right, go on. In the category of tam, once it's pagum a little bit, then it's already weakened it as a tam. It's no longer a tam. That's what he's saying. V'davka.
ודווקא כשנתערב איסור מועט לתוך היתר מרובה, אבל איסור מרובה לתוך היתר מועט, אפילו מחצה על מחצה, מסתברא שאין אומר בזה נותן טעם לפגם מותר, עד שיפגום לגמרי כנבלה לגר.
So in other words, once you have majority of the isser, then you have to go back to the higher level of pagam, because it's going after rov. The majority of this is isser, so you'd have to have the full level of ruination. But as long as it's still less than half, so like maybe midoraita, it's batel, or I don't know. It's midoraita batel barov. But we have a din of noten tam, and maybe tam ke'ikr. But there is no tam here. There's pagam. So we don't have a din of tam ke'ikr. So we can go by the din, the underlying din of rov. That's kind of what he's saying. But that's still, don't forget, we need rov. And that's what he's saying. All right.
ואם תאמר, אם כן, קדירה שאינה בת יומה, שאינה אסרת, אלא משום דנויתן טעם לפגם הוא, ולא אסרה תורה לקדירה בת יומה, עמי, והכולם משערינן דאי במאי דנפק מני לא ידינה, ומכן, מאי תמה משערינן לה. דלעלי קראו בדייתרה.
So explain.
So he's basically applying what I just said. that we do that in a situation that
yoma. So that means it's already pagum.
in a Kedera she'ena bat yoma, applying what we just said, that that we have that if there is no majority hate, we do mechza al mechza. והכולם משערים למעין נפק ולא ידינה. Assuming I cannot actually know how much Isser actually comes out of the Kedera in the moment I heat it, why shouldn't I machmir on that?
Right.
On the possibility that it's actually more than the heter that I have.
So, like, for example, let me give you a case. For example, I fry an egg in a frying pan, and the frying pan has a thick metal bottom that's thicker than the omelet that I'm making. So I've got majority metal. The pot is larger. The pot is larger than the egg that I'm cooking. So the amount of flavor potentially coming into my egg is larger than the egg. So the egg should be usher. Why would we matter it? Just because I just got through telling you need majority. And here I don't have majority. So he's going to explain. ויש לומר,
יש לומר, דכיוון דליקה אלא טעמו של איסור ולא ממשו בכל עניין שרי. דהה לא אסרת לה, אלא מחמת טעמו וטעמו בתערובת, דווקא בשיש בו הנאה בנויסן טעם, והלאו אחי שרי.
Oh, he says a couple things together here. He says, first of all, basically, I mean, I'll summarize it in one simple idea. He's basically saying, whenever it's just Taam and no mamashut at all, then we don't even need rov. That's what he's saying. Right? He's saying we don't even need rov when it's just Taam. We only needed rov when there's mamashut of the Yisr, and we wanted to mevatel it because it's pagum, because it's pogem the tarovet. But when it's just Taam, and that's our case of a pot that's exuding flavor, it's balu of flavor, is just Taam, then even if it's more, it would still be mutter. Then why? The dafka, because he adds this other point. The dafka b'sheyesh bo hanato b'noten Taam asur. Because the only time that the tina Taam is forbidden is when there's hana'ah from it. Where does he get that from? Where does he get that from? You all
the language of the Mishnah.
From our Mishnah. From our Mishnah. Kol b'hanato b'noten Taam asur. He says, Kol b'hanato, even though our Mishnah was talking about a case of mamashut, right? The actual yain fell in. But he's saying Natina Taam also requires enjoyment of the flavor. And here I'm not enjoying it. So you see that actually by talking about this idea of noten Taam Lifgam, we start to get into the idea that the Isser is only Usser if you enjoy it. There has to be some kind of enjoyment to it.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
I have it on my mind the whole time. So, because they don't seem to treat it like a subjective category, it always seems to be treated like an objective category, ta'am. And I would say ta'am is like very, very subjective. Like where
I mean, this comes up in the Shulchan Aruch, right? The case of dvash and basa, right? But the dvash is treated as Taam Lifgam, and then I think it's the Sifte Dat that raises this question. Well, a lot of people really like honey on their meat, and then they get back and forth into this argument. But it does seem like it's a subjective category, at least in the later referendum.
Right. We're trying to figure out like when you try to figure out the lists of things that are pagum and not pagum, there's it gets complicated. But there are certain things that are objectively bad, like balua flavor in a pot, and that's what we're talking about here. Balua flavor, nobody really wants the balua flavor in a pot in general. Well, sometimes with a solid with a cast iron pot, you maybe want the but that's the thing. It depends on what you're cooking afterward. I agree with you. It does seem like subjective, and we're trying to come up with a rule. I would say like this: it's up to the Moreh Halacha to decide in a case whether this is pagum or not. In other words, that's his decision to make. We're not deciding that for him. Shulchan Aruch is just giving you the rule. The rule is what's pagum, what's pogem is mutar, and then the Moreh Halacha can decide. say this is pagum, or he can ask the person that, but
But
he
it's
can
a fair
decide.
question. Is that an issue? Is that a matter of like an individual's taste, like what they like, or is it a matter of like what is like generally accepted as good for the food, right? That could be
I
a
think it
halachic
goes by what's
question.
generally accepted, because you're not going to say some person says, "Well, I don't like onions in my children a lot of times don't like onions in their omelets." So you're going to say if the egg was a sorry, if the onions were uh, kilayim or something, we're going to matter it because this person doesn't like onions. No, it goes by what is generally accepted. Rabbi Landis, you want to say something?
I'm about to have an egg. I am, because it's a fast day tomorrow. I didn't have dinner. So we're trying to get it set to the break, but we can't figure out when the break is.
The break is
Cheryl's
right now.
going crazy here in the kitchen.
Break is right now.
But whether this egg is going to taste good or not, I need the protein for tomorrow. And the word hana, this is what you addressed. The word hana can also mean benefit, not necessarily Taam.
Yeah, but I think I agree with you. But I think in this case, it's talking
Now,
about.
in these cases, we go by that.
I think in this case. But
Well,
for you,
the
the egg, if you're a real litvak, then you eat food because of what benefit you get from it. You don't care if it's good, tastes good or bad. You just eat
I'll
it
eat it standing up like my grandfather. Okay.
You'll eat it because
we
you
get
need
that
the
argument
protein.
But it's really dependent. The breaking of the egg right now is dependent on the breaking in the shear. I just mentioning to you.
Okay.
You already broke the egg? Okay, fine.
Yeah. I don't want to walk on any eggshells, so I'll stop here. Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes, and
5
everybody
minutes.
can
Okay,
have an
great.
egg.
Thank you.
I chopped up the Bedek Abayit in a very cruel way, but it'll save us a lot of reading. But Bedek Abayit is also a very interesting book. There's two Bedek Abayits. There's a Bedek Abayit of the Mechaber, and then there's this Bedek Abayit, which is of the Ra'ah, which is on the Torah Tabayit. So here, Yavdi, when you read the Bedek Abayit, this little piece that I gave here, it's all cut up. The full Bedek Abayit I gave you, we're not going to read it, but that was just I read it. I thought it's good to read the whole thing, but in class we'll just read this piece. He's questioning. Wait, what's his question? What's his question? Can you tell us what his question is?
He doesn't. Oh, his question is I don't remember.
Well, his question is actually where I have that question mark at the bottom in the beginning here. It's the same question that we really asked in the Torah Tabayit, which is how can you learn from nevela that has to be fully aser to fully pagum in order to be mutter, to a little pagum, a little bit ruined to be also mutar. How can you learn from something more strict to something like more lenient? So let's start where I gave you. לפי דבריו.
לפי דבריו, פליטת קדרה זו שאינה בת יומה הוא שאינה אוסרת משום דנתינתם שלה אינו לשבח. אבל מכל מקום הבלע עצמו
sorry, that's basically he's quoting the Torah Tabayit, which is what we kind of saw. It's not l'shevach, so right, there's no hana'ah in it. That's kind of the reason.
Right. אבל מכל מקום הבלע עצמו כמות שהוא איסור תורה הוא שהרי הבלע עצמו לא נפגם מכדי אכילת גר. But if you had the absorbed stuff itself, then it's like the isur, like the nevela, where it's the gufei isur, and then
if you could magically remove all the balua from the pot and hold it in your hand, it would require a level of pagum that would be not really lager. So what do I care that? So it's not at that state. So what do I care that it causes a slight pagam? How do I learn that out from ger?
מניין להתיר בייסורי תורה בפחות מכן?
Exactly. How can I give a heter if it's not fully ruined?
ודאי, עתיה כהלכתה דקיים עלן דטעמו ולא ממשו דרבנן, ולהכי מקילין בה. All right, so to be honest, I didn't really understand it in this cut up version. So I read the whole thing and I understood some of it. And I think his ultimately what he's trying to do is that the Torah Tabai Rashba elsewhere says that Ta'amo velo mamasho, like that the Isur on Taam without the mamashut is deoraita. And the Bedek Abayit doesn't hold that way, and he's trying to prove that the only way for the Torah Abayit to come to this conclusion is if that he agrees with him, he agrees with the Ra'ah, that actually Ta'amov v'lo being Asur is only the Rabbanan.
Okay, yeah. In other words, I wouldn't quite say it that way. I would say just that he's trying to prove that the whole din of Taam Ke'ikr is the Rabbanan, not the right. There's this whole din of Taam Ke'ikr, and we talked about this many times, whether it's the right or the Rabbanan, and we left it that the halacha we paskin, and we emphasize this l'chumra we paskin that it's duraita, but that's only a chumra. In other words, we can always go back to the din of Rabbanan, and the Ra is saying it's actually a din de Rabbanan fully. It's not at all. It is a din de Rabbanan, and that's why we maybe it is. Maybe he's explaining the Torah Tabat. I thought he was arguing on the Torah Tabat, but either way, that's why when the flavor is hagum, even a little bit, we can be makel because actually flavor is only din de Rabbanan. The fact that the flavor is there is only din Rabbanan, so we don't have to need a Torah source. In other words, he's saying like this: there is no source for this in the Torah, but we don't need a source in the Torah because the whole din is Rabbanan. That's what he's saying, which is different. I think it's a little bit different from the Torah Bayit was saying. He was saying that Natina Tam is only us. He's saying the din of Natina Tam being usher, which may be a Torah law, is only when there's a Natinat Tam and not when there's a Tinat Pagum. Okay. Actually, let's go to the Rav Chaim right away now, because he's going to give, I'll skip the Ramban. We'll get back to that. This is in my source 14 in what I sent out. This is Chidushei Rav Chaim Halevi Hilchot Malachot Ma'achalot Afurot Parak Vav. Now I'm giving you just one paragraph of it. It's actually about 15 paragraphs, but this is the one that is relevant to our discussion. It's very interesting, by the way, if you're interested to read all. There's only like there's like two main ones. There's two main chidushei Rav Chaim Mibrisk on Hilchos Ma'achalot Asurot. And there's like two main ones, I think. Maybe there's three total. It's worth to read them if you're so inclined. But let's read this little piece here. Maybe who would like to read it? Yeah, all right, Alan, go ahead.
ונראה, הנתיקן הוא מוכרח מתוך הסוגיה כמו שכתבנו. דהנה הרשב"א והר"ן הקשו דאיך מותר נותן טעם לפגם, מטעם דבעינן ראוי לגר.
Now that was the question. That was our question, right? How do you learn from Ru'i Lager to our din that even if it's a little paga?
והלא נותן טעם לפגם ראוי לגר הוא, אלא שפגם קצת. Right, isn't natan tam still meet the category of something that ger could eat? It's just a little bit damaged. V'tirtzu t'taravat shani t'kol shehu lifgam eno bichlal natan tam v'shari. Okay, and the resolution they came up with is that make sure the taravat are different because any amount of lifgam doesn't fall under the category of natan tam at all.
That's kind of like the language to me. Who is that like? Is that like the Bedek Abayit or Torah Abayit?
I think it's the Rashba.
Right. This is the Torah Abayit. This is not the Bedek Abayit. This is the Torah Abayit that it's not called Eno Bichlal. It's not in the category of Noten Tam. That's exactly what the Rashba said that we saw. He said it's called noten pagam. It's not noten tam. Bahare.
There is a lo shayach ela im nema del etzem chalat adin tam kiikar hu to be in re'ui leger. V'zeh shapir aminan the kol
Translate that.
shatam. Okay, right. So all of this is only relevant if we're in the world of saying that the category of tam kikar is matches up with Re'ui Lager. Those are the circumstances we're talking
We gotta translate that better.
Okay.
Etzem halot hadin tam ke'ikr. In other words, there is a din of tam ke'ikr. But when does that din apply? When does it chal? Only when
it kicks in when we need
or
Re'ui Lager.
In other words, right? Hu de ba'inan, it requires as a precondition Re'ui Lager. Okay, so that I can agree. How does that help? Go on.
The kol shehatam pogem ve'ena mashbiach havi bichlal ena re'ui lager ve'ena ta'am ke'ikar klal. Okay, so that works out well to when we say that anything that the taste makes worse and doesn't improve, it falls under the category of not being re'ui lager. And so it's Tam Kikar. It doesn't count as Tam Kikar.
It doesn't get started. The din of Tam Kikar doesn't get started when the Tam is not a Tam. Tam Kikar. That's kind of what he's saying, right? Tam Kikar, but this is not a Tam.
Right. Insert
the
like
Tam it's not
tov in brackets.
Masha Ein Kain.
Masha Ein Kain im nema tehetera de ena re'ui lager kaima al etzem me'isar ha'me'orav. Okay, but the teruts that the Rashba gave, right, back up earlier, that Tarovot Kolshahu actually don't fall under the Kolshahu Lifgam don't fall under the category of Noten Tam. That sorry, if we're working in that world, I got lost in my steps a little bit. If we say that the heter of not being Re'ui Lager applies to the etzem of the Isser Merav, the essence.
In other words, he's saying like this: it's not that we need. It's not. There's two possibilities. Either we need Eina Ru'ui Lager on the Tarovet, or we need Etzem. We need Eina Ru'ui Lager on the juice, the Isser that goes into the Tarovet. In other words, yeah. In other words, he's saying like this: we don't require a din of Eina Ru'ui Lager on the Tarovet, but we do require a din of Eina Ru'ui Lager on the thing that is coming into the Tarovet. Masha Enkin im nema, if we would say the hetera the Eina Ru'ui Lager kaima al etzem iser ha mu'arav, maybe on the whole Tarovet we need the din of Eina Ru'ui Lager, which we don't have here.
I think I was understanding it as not as then we would just what we're calling Eina Ru'ui Lager is different. So a tarovet that's Eina Ru'ui Lager is a tarovet that's slightly pagum, as opposed to saying a tarovet that's Eina Ru'ui Lager is one in which the thing that's me'urav is itself Eina Ru'ui. And he seems to just be spelling out the Rashba's logic here. In which case, if that were the case, as the Rashba says, then you would need the thing that's me'urav to be totally disgusting, even if it's me'urav. But that just that Ru'ui Lager in the case of a tarovet and in the case of a davar atzmo, what would be ra'ui is different in these cases.
Okay, good. What do you got?
I
Lexi?
don't think that's how, because I think the whole point, at least of the Rashba, right, is that ra'ui, we only think to be dafka, not ra'ui, not suitable to be eaten when you are eating the physical thing itself and not the mixture with just the flavor, right? And so he is talking about at what point do we assess that status, right? That like if it is that we make that assessment, okay, when this isser fell in, it was ra'ui lager. Then when it falls into the thing, the flavor it's giving is a doraita usser, or yeah, if we say taam ki'ikar doraita, is a doraita usser flavor. And then how do you then like walk it back and say this is actually fine? So he says, no, when you're going to consume a thing itself, like by itself, then we assess, is this ra'ui lager? Could you eat it as it is? But when something falls into another thing, you pop it out and now you just have the flavor left. That is when we make the assessment. And we say, we don't care that when this thing fell in, it was ra'ui lager. We care that now there is only flavor. And when there is only flavor, it doesn't need to be eina ra'ui lager. It just has to be not l'shevach.
I agree that's what the Rashba is saying. I think that this particular source, and when he says, I think he is interpreting the Rashba as saying that a tarova that is pagum is bichlal eino ra'ui lager. He says the chol shetam pogem ve'eino mashpiach in the case of a tarova have bichlal eino ra'ui lager, which is I agree not what the Rashba says, but I think he is saying that actually there is a category of eino ra'ui lager for a tarova, and it's just a different it is a different standard.
Wait, let's read to the end and let's maybe get a no more then and come back. Yeah, maybe I'll read. Not that I'm a good reader, but I'll try. Im kain hare kol sheraui hu la'achila akati hu be'isura. So if so, anything that could still be eaten is still in its state of isur. V'lo pakash shem isur mina, and it didn't lose its shem isur. V'harehu adayin bichlal nevela harui lager, and then it should be still considered like rui lager and biaser. Im v'im kain hare memela yichol be gam shem tam ke'ikar le'esor gam teroto. So then the din of tam ke'ikar will apply to it and will forbid the mixture. Elevate kemoshe katavnu. He's saying not. He's rejecting that, but that's not the truth. Elevate kemoshe katavnu. The al chalot hadin shel tam ke'ikar hu de daininan be din eina rui lager. That on on whether the din of tam ke'ikar should be given to this thing is going to be decided by whether it's not rui lager. Umiyushav hetef psaka Rambam degam bebasar b'chalav v'kilaya kerem she'isser gam be'eno she'isuran gam be'eno rui lager. There he holds that even if it's not rui lager, there's still usher because it's isser hana'ah kilaya kerem and basar b'chalav. Mekom makom noten tam lifgam shari. But he allows noten tam lifgam when there's a flavor being given. Umishum dekol she'eino ra'ui lager pakami ne iser de tam ke'ikar ve'tarovet behetero, and the tarovet remains in its heter status. In other words, is it really saying? I mean, I sort of cheated, I guess. I think I explained the Torah to Bayit with this Rav Chaim in mind. In other words, so I think he's explaining the Torah to Bayit to say like this, that the din of Taam Ke'ikar doesn't get started if the Taam isn't a Taam that's Ra'ui Lager. In other words, a Ger, maybe it's, which means this is a bad Taam. The Taam is a bad Taam, even though the final product is edible to the Ger, but the Taam itself was not a Taam, it was a Pagam, like the Rashba said. Yeah, and therefore the din of Taam Ke'ikar is a Torah din, not like the Ra, it's a Torah din. against the Ra. It just doesn't happen here because it's not Ra'ui Lager. That Taam is not Ra'ui Lager, even though the final Tarova is Ra'ui Lager.
Right. I'll amend what I said earlier, which is that, yeah, he's using, right, Ra'ui Lager here. There's Ra'ui Lager, the way that we initially learn out what that status is, vis-a-vis Nevela, that when you are like for a physical thing to be suitable to be eaten, it just has to be not completely disgusting, right? But the Isor, when it is only existing in flavor form, and it is like, right, it is Lifgam, that's inappropriately because the only thing it is providing, right, is this
flavor,
is this
and the flavor is undesirable.
Exactly, right. And so, yeah, as in that he is, right, saying Ra'ui Lager, what you would consider Ra'ui is based off of whether it's physicality. And in this case, when we assess Taam Ki'ikar, we assess, is this flavor positive, and doesn't ever like begin to take effect unless it's good.
Right. What I'm getting from this, the main line I'm getting is Chalot din Taam Ki'ikar hu deba'in and Ra'ui Lager. In other that the application of the din of Taam Ki'ikar only happens when the thing that you are trying to put in is of a benefit, and that's what I think he's really explaining. He's really just explaining the Rashba, but it's not like the Ra'ah. Okay, so that's Rav Chaim. If you want to, he uses this as part of a much larger argument that he's trying to make. Let's go back and look at the Ran, because the Ran is actually quoted by the Beit Yosef. Surprisingly, the Beit Yosef does not quote the Rav Chaim. That's not because he didn't like the Rav Chaim, but because he didn't exist yet. Okay, but he quotes the Ramban. The Ran, and the Ran takes this idea of Hana'ah one step further. In other words, we're saying if you don't enjoy, he said that there's no din of Taam Ki'ikar if you don't enjoy it. If it's a bad flavor, so there's no din of Taam Ki'ikar. So the Ramban sort of likes this idea of enjoyment and goes one step further. So, Andre, you want to read the Ran?
Yeah. ודאמרינן, כל שאינו חסרה כלום ואינה נאכלת מבני זה, so he's quoting here ריש לקיש trying to define what is a פגום. פירש רש"י זה לשונו, דלאו דווקא אינה נאכלת, אלא כל שנפגם טעמה מבני זה שרי, וראיה לדבריו מגדרה שאינה בת יומה, דגדרה לה נותן טעם לפגם, ובוודאי שאינה פוגמת התבשיל כל כך עד שלא יהיה נאכלת. ובגדרה בת יומה נעמי אמרינן, אי אפשר דלא פגמה פורתה. So that's the purta. That's the also the what we read in Avodah Zarah.
Yeah, keep going.
Alma de purta de pagam sharu.
In other words, you just need a little bit of pagam to permit it.
וראיה לדבר עוד משמן ודבש וקורט של חילתית ודומיהן שהתירו בפרק אין מעמידים משום נותנתם לפגם.
This is another source that I didn't assign, but there's another source about basically very sharp spices that get into honey, and that if the sharp spice is usur and it ruins that, but it spoils the honey a bit. That's also mutar, and so it's another source.
שאינן נפסלין מאכילת אדם, שהרי כולן נאכלין, הן.
He says these cases you're going to eat the honey, so it's not that it's unfit to eat. So there's a proof that you don't need to be fully destroying the food. Yeah. Alma,
kol de'ika purta de pagam shari. So you just need a little bit and it's still allowed. ואף על גב דנותן טעם לפגם מנבלה, גם רעילה, וכל שראויה לגר, שמיה נבלה, ואף על פי שנפגמה הטעם, היינו טעמה בפני שנאכלת בפני עצמה. ולפיכך אסורה עד שתפגם מאכילת גר.
That case that we're learning it from has to be, you're eating it itself, you're eating the substance itself, so therefore it has to be fully ruined. Aval.
But concerning ta'arovet, she'olchin bo acher netinatam, כל שטעמו פוגם התבשיל קצת מותר, לפי שאינו נותן טעם.
Now he can explain. Now he's explaining. Lefi she'eno noten tam. Go ahead.
אבל עדיין צריך...
שאינו נותן טעם, דאדרבא פוגם הוא.
Okay.
Right? That's exactly the language of, again, the Rashba. Right? Very much like the Rashba. So, but he's going to add one more point. אבל.
אבל עדיין צריך ליישב איך יגמרנה לה מנבלה, ונראה לי, דהיינו, טעמה דמה מצינו בנבלה, שלא אסר את התורה, אלא כשהיא ראויה לגר, מפני שאוכלה נהנה מן האיסור, אף על פי שהיא נפגמה קצת. אבל כל שאינו ראויה לגר, כיוון שאינו נהנה מן האיסור, יתיר את התורה.
So here he's coming up with the principle. He's like, almost like darshaning time and Dikra. Is learning out why did the Torah say that if it's not fit for a ger, you can have it. So he says, you know why? Because you don't enjoy it. He says the Torah is, when it's fit for a ger, why is it forbidden to you? Because you're ne'aneh from it. But if it's not fit for a ger, so you're not ne'aneh from it, so it's permitted. So as long as you're not enjoying it, it all comes down to whether you're enjoying it. If you're not enjoying it, it's permitted. The Torah permitted it.
ואף על פי שחל עליה איסור מתחילה, אף באיסור שנותן טעם בהיתר, כיוון שהתיר נפגם קצת מן האיסור, נמצא שזה שאוכלו אינו נהנה מן האיסור, אלא מצטער עליו, ילקח שערי, אף על פי שחל איסור מתחילה באותו דבר שנתערב בהיתר.
So he's saying, like, you're not ne'aneh from this tinat taam, I guess. This, even if it's a small amount of tinat taam, you're not ne'aneh from it. You'd rather it not be there. You would rather... This is actually very nice limud. In other words, he's saying, I'm the taam, even though it's only pogem a little bit, but I'm not ne'aneh from it. It's the tarovet is ruined a little bit from it. I'm ne'aneh from the tarovet, but I'm not ne'aneh from the taam, from the forbidden taam that's there, because that's making the tarovet worse. So I'm not ne'aneh. It all goes back to whether I'm ne'aneh or not, and I'm not ne'aneh. So therefore, we can learn it from the ger, because that's the whole reason that the ger, that the nevela that's not really the ger is permitted, because I'm not ne'aneh from it. Now he's going to go up with a logical extension of that. So what about hana'ah? What about where I do have hana'ah?
ולפי זה, קרוב אני לומר שאם הגדיל איסור מדתו של היתר עד שהוא משביח יותר כשאוכלו בגודל מדתו ממה שהוא פוגם בהפסד, טעמו אסור עד שיפסל מלאכול לאדם כנבלה.
So he's saying like this, is once, if it's all dependent on hana'ah, then I could imagine a case where it's the isser mixed in with my heter, and it made my heter bigger. Now it's true that I'm not really ne'aneh from the flavor of this isser that got there, but I am ne'aneh from the fact that I have a larger quantity. So then I need to have the higher level of not ru'ui to eat it to a ger, not ru'ui to eat. Because what was the whole point of the not ru'ui to eat? It was that if I have the actual substance, it has to be that I'm ne'aneh from the substance. But the substance is ruined. I'm not ne'aneh from the substance. When it's taam, I don't have the substance here. But what about where I have so much of the taam, and there's a lot of pieces of pork fell in, and now it is true that it's ruining my tarovet, but I have twice as much food here, so I'm ne'aneh. So if everything relies on how much I'm ne'aneh, then this should be usher. So he's karov lomar et zeh. He's leaning towards saying that because it's a logical extension of the din. It's not exactly explicitly written anywhere. He's sort of inventing it. Yeah. So this is the base Yosef brings this opinion, and the Shulchan Aruch brings this opinion. Okay, go on.
וכי אמרינן בפגם כל שהוא סגי, היינו כשפוסל יותר, בקלקול טעמו ממה שמשביח בגודל מידתו. אבל הרשב"א זה לשונו.
No, Zal, I think.
ז"ל.
Zal, the Rashba, Zichrono Livracha.
התיר בספר תורת הבית הערוך כל שההיתר מרובה מן האיסור, וכאי יהיב טעמו לפגם, דאם משום ממשו דאורייתא ברובה, בטיל, ואם משום טעמה, אין כאן נותמתן, כיוון שהוא פוגם אלו דבריו. וזה לשונו דעתי...
I think again, Zal.
again, Zal? אוקיי. ואין דעתי נוחה בהיתר זה.
So he doesn't like this heter, but basically there's a machloket here. The machloket is that the Rashba is more lenient. The Rashba allows, as long as there's a simple majority, as long as you have more heter than isser, then the whole Torah should be permitted. And he doesn't care that you're neh. The Rashba says, see, the Theran says, in that exact same case, I would say, well, wait a second, even though it's not majority, it's still so much new heter, new isser coming in here that I'm now having so much more food, I'm happy. It's like this joke that my mother told me, which is two old ladies are complaining about the restaurant. And they say, one says, yeah, this restaurant is terrible. The food is just inedible. And the woman says, yes, you're right. And the portions are so small. In other words, that's the same joke here, you see. If it's inedible, what do you care? The portions are small. Well, if it's untasty food, but I have more of it, maybe I like it. Unless it's totally inedible, then I would be. Then the Ran would agree that it would be. If it's actually inedible, then the Ran would agree that it's permitted.
And this is like the very subjective part of the whole thing.
Yeah, because the it's true, because the Ran is learning an interesting point. He's saying this whole din of ra'ui masha'ena ra'ui lager, that's subjective. That's what in how ruined should it be for that ger? In other words, would somebody want to have it? It's very interesting. It's like the Torah. It's almost like the Torah is saying, don't have enjoyment from isurim. If you want to have an isser and you don't enjoy it, it's almost. I mean, you could take this too far, and that would be to say, if you don't enjoy this isser, then you could do the isser as long as you don't enjoy it. That would be taking it too far. But the point is, the Torah is worried about you enjoying, you getting sort of benefit from an isser. If it's not really enjoyable to you, then or to an average person, then maybe the Torah didn't forbid it. That's kind of the general concept that's going on here, which is a dangerous concept to say, because we don't want to permit any isser as long as you claim you don't enjoy it. That's interesting. All right. Any questions so far? So we're struggling with this idea. We're struggling with this idea of how to get the din of a small pagam from the idea of not rui lager. And I think we saw different approaches. We saw basically the question is, it's either because Taam K'ikr is anyway d'Rabbanan, or because the added flavor itself is kind of not rui lager. That's what the Ran is kind of saying. That added flavor is not rui lager, even though the mixture is rui lager, but the added flavor is like something I don't really want. I don't enjoy it. And so it's similar to Ein Rui Lager.
So I'm a bit confused how the Ran makes the jump from Rui Lager to Nehene Min Isur. Because like the Gemara itself seems to be saying that it's not Rui Lager because it's unedible. Like
right.
Has nothing
well, he
to
says,
do
what does unedible mean? You don't enjoy it.
Yeah, but it has nothing to do with Hana. It's just not edible whatsoever. It's not even Rui Lacher Kelev almost.
Well, no, it's not. It is Rui Lacher Kelev. Maybe there's different levels. It's just not Rui Lacher Ger. It's not something that you would normally eat as a person.
Well, the Gemara goes in detail saying like that it has to be a meat that was like forbidden from the beginning, and it has like really like no,
it doesn't say that. That's one.
No, the Ula said that like Oh, sorry, my bad. I think I got a little confused, but I still find the jump from not royal ger to like Hana to be like a little far-fetched.
I think he's answering the question of why would you be able to eat something that's not really Ligera? Well, then
Because
you're not really eating.
it's not kari achila. Like that's how I understood it. It's not called eating whatsoever because it's like disgusting.
Well, you might
Yeah.
say that is there's maybe that's the Torah doesn't even to say if it's like rotten meat that's afara de ara, right? That we saw that in the Gemara that if it's like turned to dirt, then well, that's what he said about the one that's a leprous animal. I think that the concept of Ra'ui Laker is that it's still edible, it's just not good. I'm not sure. It's a good question you're asking. It's somehow that you're not really neheneh from it, but
because the Ran seems to be the only one that has that kind of understanding, right? Like making that jump from like the other ones, they're saying like it's totally different.
We can look at the words again. I mean, what did he say? He said, what did he say? You know, every time I read something, I'm get convinced by it. So
with Achila, the point is Hana. Other Isurim may have Hana, not have Hana, but the point of Achila is Hana. There's only one other classification that's like that. And that's why the Rambam puts Malchalot, Asurot, and Isurei Bia in the same sefer. But everything else is different. So I mean, Achila, if you don't have Hana, then
well, he says like this.
Really
he says
have a nice Achila in the sense of Isur.
I mean, the Ran learns from what the Torah forbids. The Torah forbids something that is a little bit pagum, right? It says asur af al pi shehi nifgam ktsat. If you have an avela that is nifgam ktsat, then it's forbidden to eat it. But if it's aval, if it's not rui lager, whatever that category is, it's no longer forbidden. And he doesn't say because it's like dirt or it's like eating garbage. He says, Kevan Hetira Torah. That's what he says. He says the Torah permits it because you're not neheneh from it. Not because he could have said because it's no longer food, it's rancid, it's garbage. He doesn't say that. He says because you're not neheneh from it. You're asking where he gets it from? He's a Rishon. That's where he gets it from. That's his explanation of the Torah. His explanation of the Torah is that.
Can he just be trying to get us back to the Mishnah?
To the what?
Like this isn't such a shocking, like the idea that like shifting back to a world about Hana'ah. It's about the Mishnah. It's
right.
Not,
the
like,
Mishnah
it doesn't have
says
to be this, like,
exactly.
Invention.
The Mishnah says kolsha behanato benoten tam asur. But the Mishnah is talking about when there's a mixture, dafka, when there's a little bit of something coming in, and he's talking about a case where he's trying to explain that, as I say, he's darish time de Christ. He's trying to understand the reason that the Torah forbid a nevela when it's a little bit pagum and permitted it when it's more pagum. And he's saying the only difference he can see is that one you are enjoying, one you're not enjoying. But yeah, you're right. The idea of hana'ah being permitted, or lack of hana'ah being permitted, is seen in the Mishnah. So he's got a Mishnah on his side.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is just to respond to Reuven, that it's like, it's not, even though the context is different, right? The Mishnah is talking about a ta'aruvit. It's not so crazy to think that the distinction here should be about hana'ah, because in fact, like the Mishnah uses some version of that in another case.
In other words, we do
overly
see there's a concept of hana'ah, right? All right, so I think we'll stop here. I think this is very important foundation. Basically, we don't have to read the first two sifim of the Beit Yosef because I quoted the sources of the Beit Yosef, basically what he brings. But this gives us the whole foundation of the din. And the truth is, in the halacha that we're going to see next week, all these things are going to come up again. In other words, this Ran is going to come up, and the Rav Chaim is not going to come up, but these distinctions about a little bit pagum and fully pagum is going to come up. Okay, shukayach to everybody. I hope you enjoyed, learned a lot, and are eager to come back next week.
Rav Nachum, for next week, should we focus on the part of the source sheet where you said Makrod al Shulchan
Aruch? Focus. Yes, we're going to do the Shulchan Aruch. I'm not going to go through all of the Beit Yosef for sure. I'm mostly going to focus on the Shulchan Aruch. There may be. I'll tell you. I can tell you now, but there is a certain Beit Yosef that I'm interested in. But that's later, on like Sif Vav, I think.
Yeah, I think you assigned it in the sheet.
Yeah,
probably
in that list, there's one Beit Yosef.
So there you go. So do that. Is it Vav? Is it on Sif Vav? Is that what I?
on Zion.
On Zion. Well, I'll check it. If it's not what I wanted, then I'll add it. And if it is, then won't add it. Wait, let me just look for a second here. Yeah, Zion. Yeah, Zion. Exactly, Zion. There are other interesting things here. There's also Darkei Moshe. You should see the Darkei Moshe, particularly Bet and Gimel, I guess. But that's like sort of later. Yeah, Zion. The main Beit Yosef that I'm interested in is Zion. There are other interesting Beit Yosefs, but I don't think I'll do them. Yeah, I mean, you should learn them. It's always good to learn all of it, but if you have questions, you can certainly ask me in class, or if there's something that you were troubled by next week, we can discuss a Beit Yosef that you're interested in. It's also possible. Okay. Anyway, have a Tzom Kal also. Okay, Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.